Clay. This is the third book in the City Watch trilogy. Oh, I have it right here. This is the book. So, what's going on now? This is a spoiler video. If you are following my Discworld interactions, but you haven't read the series yet and you don't want spoilers, just wait a couple days. On Thursday, my vlog will come up and I give you some brief spoiler-free thoughts. But this is a spoiler discussion for Feet of Clay. So this is the third book in the City Watch series. And I almost said trilogy, because some people say trilogy and I don't quite understand why. We'll get into that later though. Anyway, so in this one, we have the plot of there are some murders afoot. So we have two priests that have been murdered. We have golems that seem to be going rogue and possibly maybe killing people. And we have the patrician who is being poisoned, and Vimes is on the case. So we've got a few things going on in this book, but more importantly, at least for me, we have more of our established characters. We have a few new characters who are gems, and we have a lot more themes discussions. So the characters and the themes are really where my interest lies with this series, so that's where most of my focus is going to be. A couple things that I found really interesting. We'll start with the characters. Vimes, I did whine and complain in my last video, in my last review, that there wasn't enough Vimes in Men-at-Arms, and Terry Pratchett heard my cry and redacted whatever he wrote before in the third book, rewrote it real quick, and then made sure that I got to read some more Vimes. So I'm pleased. He's a good responder. Vimes is such an interesting character because in the last book, in Men-at-Arms, we dealt with a lot of identity complex with him, him having to go from this very poor man to marrying a very wealthy woman, and his difficulty in adjusting to this well-to-do life, as well as him stepping back from the Night Watch and having to reconcile with the fact that being a part of this is a big piece of his identity, and stepping away from it is like losing a piece of himself, right? So last book we dealt with some identity stuff with him, and it was really interesting in this book to hang out with him again, because while his alcoholism was not in the forefront, it was still there. His kind of wrestling with classism, it was still there. So like little mentions like that where it feels like he's losing a lot of his autonomy by having this extreme amount of luxury, but he also feels like he's losing his identity because these things that have always been a really big factor in his life, that have always mattered so much to him, he no longer has, or he's getting a lot less of, he's stepping away from. But at the same time, in this book, he shows that he doesn't really have any issue at, he knows exactly what he believes is right. He knows where his line, his moral line is, and he won't move. So like when the patrician tells him to destroy the golem, and he's like, no, it's just not gonna happen. Like we have scenes like that from him where we see that while he's kind of losing his identity, or rather having to figure out what his identity looks like in this new life, he, at the same time, his morals and his beliefs are solid ground, and he won't hesitate to stay loyal to those. And with that, we still have some prejudice being shown in him, and we still have a lot of ways in which he views the world, and his moral grounding, so to speak, is wrong and is faulty, and has to be addressed, and has to be changed at times. We have Navi, who has the silliest arc in this book. Oh, it's so funny to find out that he has this bloodline, he has this heritage that's big, important, and people are expecting so much of him now. And he's still Navi, as Carrot put it in his letter home. He said, "My friend Navi is still Navi, just a little bit more." He is in this book. He's still Navi, just a little bit more. Angua and Carrot are in this book a little bit less, and they have a little bit of relationship drama, a little, where she doesn't feel like she can stay with Carrot, but she never actually attempts to leave him. But they also have a good arc as far as the themes and how they participate in that. So I really liked that, though I don't really feel like their relationship or personal, I don't really feel like we gained any ground with them, but I did like how they participated with the exploration of the themes. Other side characters like Detritus are just always a joy, never get tired. But anyway, we also get some new characters introduced like Cherry Littlebottom. So Cherry, I loved hanging out with her character. I loved her at the beginning when we have that scene with her and Vimes, before we know that she's a female dwarf. We have this conversation where she's like, my name is Cherry Littlebottom. And he doesn't react. And she's like, Cheery. Cherry Littlebottom is my name. And my dad's name is Jolly Littlebottom. And my granddad, I don't remember what her granddad's name was, but like, she's like, I'm used to being mocked. Just mock me. And Vimes refuses to crack. But then whenever she leaves, he crumbles because it's a silly name. But we also get a lot of themes exploration through her character as well. And then I don't remember how to say his name. Well, I mean, I never know how to say his name, but I don't remember Dorfel. We get the introduction of golems as an entire race, but we also get the introduction of Dorfel, who is a gem and another character that I so happily read any scene from and hope to see more of in future books. But anyway, those are the characters. Vimes, I think, was really the star character-wise. Well, Vimes and Cherry were the stars of this book character-wise. Themes-wise, wow! This is tough to talk about because, once again, as just seems to be the way with Discworld books now, there's a million things happening at once. There's a million things Terry is trying to talk about all at the same time. So I will attempt to discuss some of them. So the discussion of racism continues in this book with the golems, obviously, because they're an entire group of people that are considered subhuman or just not human at all. They are servants, they are slaves, they are objects. They're not treated as humans because it's convenient to treat them that way so that they can be used for their slave labor. Just like a real one-to-one symbolism there. But anyway, so we've got that, but then we also have the continued discussion with Angua and Cheery, because Cheery has a prejudice against werewolves because of a werewolf that attacked her family and killed her cousin, I think it was, way back. And so now she's just like, werewolves are, they're evil creatures. They can pretend to be human and live among us, but a werewolf will always revert back to its base instincts and will always be a killer and should not be allowed in the Watch, should not be allowed in common society, should not be allowed to pretend to be human, right? So she has this prejudice that she speaks very openly about with her bestie, Angua, who is a werewolf. So love that for her. She can't say anything about it. She keeps her race under wraps for obvious reasons. So Angua's essentially facing the same thing that Carrot faced in the previous book, where people were outright just saying horrible things about dwarfs, and he's like, yo, that's me, I'm one of them. And Angua can't say that. So she just kind of has to keep quiet and be like, yep, cool, awesome, yep, good point. But Cheery and Angua are developing a truly strong bond. So eventually, obviously, all that has to be addressed whenever Angua saves Cheery in werewolf form, and Cheery has to actually face the fact that her friend is one of the people that she believes is inclined toward violence, and she has to address, okay, so what changes here? My perspective on my friend or my perspective on this race? And then add on the layer that the stereotype, and I really liked this actually about all of the other than living, was that the term that was used? The undead, I don't remember, but all of the undead people, I really liked the way Pratchett, keeping his humor on everything, that he let each of the creatures, like the werewolves and the vampires and the boogeyman and the ghosts and the ghouls and all the things, they were the stereotype on the surface, but there was always a lot more to it. And I really liked the camaraderie that was shown with Angua and the other undead as well, how she so lovingly was like, yeah, they're vampires. Yeah, they suck blood. But you know, this old lady who comes into our bar and doesn't know who anyone is and doesn't realize that she's in a bar of undead, we're protective of her. Someone stole stuff from her once, and those vampires, they sucked them dry. They didn't have any blood left in their bodies when they were found. And it was like, you still did the thing, but it was like in defense of a helpless old lady. And it was just funny. It was just a funny scene. Anyway, that was off topic. What were we talking about? You have the added layer of the fact that Angua does have these werewolf inclinations. The stereotype about werewolves, it isn't completely dishonest. Maybe the prejudice isn't deserved, but it's not dishonest. She does turn into a werewolf at every full moon, and she does while she's vegetarian and doesn't kill humans. She wouldn't mind a tasty human snack every now and then when she's in werewolf form. Like, she doesn't not have the inclination. So you have that added layer of Cheery saying all these things about werewolves, and she's like, where was I that night? What was I doing? It wasn't me, was it? Like, it's just like that awkward, oh no, kind of situation. So that's kind of one way that if you think too hard about it, then some things can kind of break down, but it keeps everything really light. It keeps things moving where, you know, you have the humor and the goofy side of it. That's all very light and fun, but like if you want to explore those themes, it's all there. But anyway, speaking of Angua and Cheery's relationship, one of the things that they bond over is the sexism that's addressed in this world. Cheery, being a female dwarf in dwarven society in the Discworld world, the women are not expected to signify that they're women. The default is male dwarfs, masculinity. And female dwarfs are, Angua said something about female dwarfs are just as commonly cited with trying to take out someone's knees, like being very aggressive. And so the female dwarfs and the male dwarfs, they all act the same. They all look the same. Female dwarfs grow beards. Like, there's no difference, and it wouldn't be, as I understand it, it wouldn't be until you get very, very close to a female dwarf that you may learn that she's female. At least that's the only thing that makes sense to me. And I talked about this on my Discord because I was a bit confused, because Carrot does have a mom, obviously. Like, he said, I'm pretty sure what did he say? I'm pretty sure my stepmother or my step aunt was a female. And it's like, well, I mean, your mom certainly was. You know she's your mom. You call her mom. And also, you left behind a female dwarf in book 1, when you left and joined the Watch. There was a girl that you were pursuing. You were trying to court her. You were trying to, you wanted to marry her. And you knew she was a woman, so, like, why this random, I'm pretty sure my step-aunt was a woman. I know I've met women before. I know you've met women before. You send letters home to one all the time, and you were gonna marry one recently. So, like, it is a little bit weird. But anyway, the idea is you don't signify that you're a woman. The default is man, and if someone is close enough to you to learn otherwise, then fine, but you don't put it out there. That's considered off-putting in dwarven culture. So we also get to tackle sexism in this book, where Cherry would like to signify that she's a woman, but that's just not accepted in her race. So Angua kind of helps her to kind of work through that and do it anyway, and just change her name, wear lipstick, show her knees, like, just do it, even though it's not culturally acceptable. And one thing that I really liked in this book that Terry has done throughout all 3 of the books that I've read, but I think was really, really on the forefront here, is showing that nobody's all the way right. People like Vimes, who is indisputably, I think, a wonderful character to follow and has so many character traits that are wonderful, has a lot of prejudices within him, and they're shown through all of these books. Characters like Carrot, who all throughout this book is fighting for equality for the golems, and who is the one poking holes in the ideology that these people are carrying so that they can see, you're wrong. The golems deserve rights and to be treated like humans. And yet, when Cherry wants to signify that she's a woman, he's very put off by that. And one thing that Pratchett, oh, and Cherry herself, who is prejudiced against werewolves, you know, like Pratchett does a really good job. Cherry herself is prejudiced against werewolves. Pratchett does a really good job of showing that we're all wrong in some way. You know, like nobody has it all figured out. So while you may be seeing things correctly over here you may have a blind spot. And Carrot is a great example of that, where he's doing so much good for people around him, but he has these sexist ideals that come from the way that he was raised. So I really like how Pratchett doesn't have like the morally good and the morally bad. He has the people who are doing their darndest but are wrong and are having to confront that wrongness. So it's not being morally perfect in every way. It's when being confronted with the way you were raised and with the ideals that you've always had, when being confronted with where that may not be right, what do you do with it? How do you respond? How do you move from there? So I really like that. Again, this is something that we've seen through all the two books before this one, but just really I felt was, maybe I just noticed it more, resonated with it more in this book, but I really appreciate Pratchett showing that, you know, we're all human here and we're all fallible. What do we do when we realize it? Anyway, the core new theme that was brought into this book is the dehumanizing of the golems. They are these creatures that are created. They are made by man. And, well, I mean, there's some sort of spiritual significance to their creation for sure. But, you know, created by hands, maybe not animated by man, but created by man. You know what I mean? Anyway, they are these creatures and they don't eat, they don't sleep, they take breaks on holy holidays. But other than that, they are, you know, kind of machine-like, and because of that, people treat them that way. They have to have a master, they have these commands that are written into them, and people buy them, and they work them for their own good. And Carrot, one thing that I loved about this book was how Carrot poked holes in the logic that people were using to justify dehumanizing the golems, where he would say stuff like when he bought one of the golems and Angua said, well, you realize that if you buy him, you're responsible for anything he does if he's going rogue. And Carrot goes, really? I'm responsible? If that's true, then why are we trying to pin murders on these creatures that apparently the owners are responsible for everything that they do? And then another point where somebody said, I don't remember what, but he was like, really? If it's just a tool, then how is it true? Then why are we trying to say that they do this? Like, he kept pointing out, you think this, yet you act like this. So we got to sort one of these things out. And it's just how people would justify oppressing this entire group so that for their conveniences. With all these themes, with all these things that Pratchett is doing within the story, and not subtly. I mean, like I said, like a lot of these things are pretty right there. You can engage with them or not, but they're right there. With all that, you still just have so much humor littered throughout it, which I've mentioned a couple things already, but maybe my favorite scene in the book is, whoops, what did I do? Sorry. Is the scene with the boogeyman. Yeah, here it is. Oh, I love it. Okay, so this is when they were talking about the old lady at the inn, the one with dementia who comes in and she doesn't know who she's talking to. She doesn't know anything that's going on. She doesn't realize that she's hanging out with a bunch of undead and she's human. And at one point, the boogeyman comes and tries to grab... Sorry, some of my pages are falling out. It's not my fault. I bought this secondhand and it was already damaged. But anyway... There it is. So the boogeyman grabbed her and wasn't going to let her leave. And so she threw a blanket on him. And when Cherry was like, at this point, Cherry asked, "What? Why? What?" Ingo says, "Existential uncertainty. He doesn't know whether he exists or not. It's cruel, I know, but it's the only thing we've found that works against boogeymen. Blue fluffy blanket for preference." They checked what the preference when we indulge or take advantage of your existential crisis of you not knowing if you exist or not, when we do, I have to imagine that there was a moment where people in the guard sat down with a boogeyman and said, listen, this is your weakness. You don't know if you exist or not. Sometimes we're going to have to take advantage of that. So when we do, what type of blanket would you like for us to throw on you? And the boogeyman is just like, blue and fluffy would be nice. Like, I love the outright humor. I love the subtextual humor. If you think about it for 2 seconds, it's just, anyway. Blue fluffy blanket for preference, she noted Cheery's blank expression. Look, boogeymen go away if you put your head under the blankets. Everyone knows that, don't they? So if you put their head under a blanket, oh, I see. Oh, that's nasty. He'll feel all right again in 10 minutes, English skimmed. Anyway, then they go into Cheery's family being attacked by a werewolf. So that's unfortunate. It's just so funny, you know? Like, that didn't need to be added, but Pratchett is constantly adding little world building things, little things to help you understand the world and how it works and the chaos all around us. And it's just so fun. I don't have a lot to say about the plot because if I'm honest, and I don't think I've really talked about the plot in any of these videos, so thanks for being patient with me on that. But I don't have a lot to say about this plot either because the truth is that I just don't enjoy mystery plots very often at all. And all 3 of these books have been whodunits. And with this, we have 2 whodunits that are happening at once. And I don't hate it. I just don't care about a whodunit. That said, the reveal that not only was it the Candlewick that was poisoning the patrician, that's so clever. I had a million theories. That was not one of them. Not only was that the reveal, which I thought was a very clever reveal for like someone who's being poisoned every day. I feel like I've seen that mystery. Even though I don't read mysteries, I've seen that mystery enough. And I've never seen that be the solution before. But anyway, so there's that. But then there's also the added layer that the patrician has known pretty much since the beginning of this investigation. He figured it out first, but he let the investigation go on and continue to be poisoned every day so that Vimes could be the one to sort it out, which I just love. Actually, I really love the relationship that I'm beginning to see between the patrician and Vimes just in general. The conversations that they have, the seeming respect between the two, despite having such different ideologies and expectations. I don't know. I don't care for mysteries and generally have no interest in talking about plot in any of these books. There's enough to talk about without having to talk about the plot. But in this one in particular, I really loved how that one wound up. Really, I think the resolution to both of the mysteries in this book were quite satisfying, despite it not being my thing. Okay, last order of business. Let's talk about what I'm going to do next, because the natural, obvious answer is for me to read Thud next, I believe is the next City Watch. Okay, here's the thing. People keep calling this a trilogy, which is very confusing because when I look at the chart, it's definitely not one. So somebody mentioned that there's a big leap from this book that I just read to the next City Watch book. I don't know if that means that there's a time jump or that there's a big leap in themes or expectation. I don't know what that means. You don't have to tell me. It's okay. But anyway, here's how I'm feeling. I'm having a wonderful time, obviously. I'm loving these books. I'm loving Pratchett's writing. However, I am beginning to feel fatigued by the patrician, trying to get rid of the patrician and instate a king. That's another thing that he talks about, hierarchies and about monarchies and kingship in general. He talks about this a lot in his books as well. I haven't even touched that, but that's also a reoccurring theme in these books. Anyway, dethrone the patrician, get rid of the patrician and instate a king has been the thing that's happening in each of these books. It's not the only thing, but it is a thing. It's a major plot line for each of these books. And it's starting to feel a little bit stale for me. He finds a different way to do it each time. It is interesting, and learning more about the patrician is very interesting, but I'm not interested in whodunits, and I am starting to feel a little bit fatigued by certain things that are getting repeated. So, people have said that there's a big difference between book 3 and book 4. I don't know what that means. Maybe all of the things that I just said are resolved in book 4. What do I know? However, something that I'm starting to have some dread about is that equal rights was brought up in this book twice. And I haven't read Equal Rights yet. So I don't know what it means. I don't know what that's about. And I'm starting to get stressed out about the fact that I've chosen to read by arc instead of chronologically, because I fear that I'm missing out on some small connections, tidbits, just little gems that Pratchett is dropping in to make things connect. I fear that I'm missing that by not reading in chronological order. And I know many people advise me to read in chronological order, and I chose to ignore them. So now I'm gonna take a break from the City Watch. I'm sorry for those who are trying to match my reading pace and trying to read the books with me. Me changing plans is probably annoying, and I'm sorry for that. But I think I'm going to take a break from City Watch arc, and I'm going to switch and do chronological. Now, I know that my good buddy Daniel recommends chronological.
Don't start with the first book, Colors of Magic. Bad entry point. No. Don't start there. No. Back. No. No.
I hear you, buddy. Go chronological. So I realize that people have opinions about how to do things. And I think that the reason a lot of people that recommend against chronological is because the first two books are relatively weak compared to Pratchett's other work. But I think now I'm well established enough with Pratchett that I feel comfortable going back and reading some of his weaker novels, because I'm in a committed relationship with his books at this point. So even if I don't think that Color of Magic and the next one are amazing, I'm still going to keep reading. So I think that's what I'm going to do. You can yell at me. It'll be okay. But I think that's what I'm going to do. I just don't really I really like the world that Pratchett has built, and I don't want to miss out on being able to experience the fullness that this world has to offer if I'm reading things and not understanding everything that he's saying. So that's how I'm feeling right now. I'm going to switch to Color of Magic. And obviously that means that some of the books that will come up as I'm reading chronological I'll have already read them. I'm not going to reread them. I'll just continue on with the list, and I think that's the direction that I'm going now. Anyway, that was my review for Feet of Clay. I'm sure I missed some stuff. I'm sure I didn't talk about some things that you wanted me to talk about, because for 400 pages, boy, was it packed with things to talk about. So feel free to continue the discussion in the comments. Tell me what your favorite parts of the book were, your favorite characters, things that I didn't mention that you want to talk about some more. Please chat with me about it in the comments. I committed in January to reading a Discworld book every month for the year of 2023. So next month, the month of May, we're in April, the month of May, I will be reading The Color of Magic. So if you're trying to match my pace, if you're trying to read along with me, again, I'm sorry for pivoting, but that will be the next book that I read. I post videos every Monday and Friday on the main channel, Tuesdays and Thursdays on this channel. I'll see you again soon. Bye.